Shalom and welcome, Baruch haba, to Yeshiva B'nai Noach. I'm Tom Averna. Welcome to my series on Torah study. Today we'll look at some practical ideas on how to begin your study. As I've expressed before, it's my opinion that everyone, Jew and Gentile, can and should study Torah as much and as often as you can. But I've also pointed out that there should be an understanding that these 5 books of Moses, as well as all of Tanakh, were specifically written as an instruction manual for Israel regarding their relationship with Hashem and Hashem's commission to Israel to become priests and teachers to the rest of the world. So, as those who are not directly connected to Judaism study the texts, they should understand that many of the laws and commandments listed here, as well as festivals and traditions, are specifically for Israel to enable them to achieve the spiritual level God's called us to do, and there's no requirement for non-Jews to follow these. But still, for everyone, Jew and Gentile alike, there are life-changing teachings that will spiritually enrich all who study and practice them. Finally, it's always best for both Jew and Gentile to be guided by a rabbi in your studies. As I've said before, I am not a rabbi, but I offer these studies and these ideas as a fellow student for those who, for whatever reason, can't find a rabbi to teach them. So here are some of the things we'll be exploring in this video: establishing a study routine, time, place, and consistency, all being important. The importance of reading in Hebrew, as well as your native language. Accessibility and practice for both of these. Engaging with Torah commentaries, very important. Voices from tradition. Exploring the PaRDeS, we'll take a look at what that means, the 4 levels of Torah interpretation. And we'll deal with active Torah study, reading, questioning, as well as reflection on all of the things that you've studied. Before we talk about routine, let me make an important suggestion. Most of you have probably at least skimmed the Hebrew Bible, but if not, I think it's important to do so. I think you should set aside some time, if you can, to at least skim it, beginning with Genesis, then through the prophets, and finally the writings. In Hebrew, those divisions are called the Torah, the Navi'im, and the Ketuvim. You'll often hear the Hebrew Bible referred to as the Tanakh, which comes from the first letter of each of those divisions. Now, at the very least, if reading through them seems too daunting for you, consider at least finding places online that summarize each of the 24 books that make up the Tanakh. Now, some sites to consider that have these kinds of reviews would be Torah.org or Sefaria.org. And I'll be looking at those in the next video when I give you a better look at my personal Torah study. We'll take a look at some of those websites and go to them. But if you want even shorter summaries, you can find them on those sites. This will give you a complete picture. And you can also find Christian sites that do this. But I ask you to consider expanding your understanding if you were raised Christian by looking at this study through Jewish lenses. So let's first talk about a routine, setting a realistic and consistent schedule, daily goals like reading an Aliyah a day or weekly planning, utilizing study resources, online support, and multi-year plans. In spite of Ralph Waldo Emerson's misquoted and misinterpreted line that, quote, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, unquote, studies show that learners who establish fixed daily study periods of a reasonable length will learn more and find more pleasure in their studies. Consistency helps form lasting habits, and morning hours, usually cited as the most productive for focused learning, but really any time that you can set aside 15 to 30 minutes, then plan on doing that. It's best to keep that time consistent, but even that doesn't have to happen. Jewish tradition underscores regular Torah study, exemplified in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, which encourages daily dedication. So again, even 15 to 30 minutes a day sustains progress, and no burnout involved in that. If you again have that consistency and work on it at a time that's convenient for you. Again, should be or could be consistent with the same time every day, but it doesn't have to be. What matters is that you are comfortable with that time frame. And here's what I recommend: an Aliyah a day study plan. Now, if you're not familiar, the Aliyah is part of each portion or parsha in Torah, the 5 books of Moses, is divided into roughly into 52 portions or parshas. Okay, each parsha is divided into 7 divisions. And those are the 7 that if you are in a synagogue, you can be called up to do an aliyah, an ascension, to read the Torah. But so again, that concept, I think, is a small, manageable portion of Torah study that you can do daily. It's really the best way to start. So all you need to do is block out that 15 to 30 minute time slot, and you can get through an aliyah, one of the 7 divisions each day. And not only does this allow you a doable study habit, but you'll also be joining perhaps millions of others around the world studying the exact same portion as you are. You'll also find a very interesting phenomena in doing so. You'll begin to see, and it's incredible the way that this works out. It's almost like God planned it this way. I said tongue-in-cheek, you will begin to see that the world itself, read the headlines, because the world itself seems to act and react around each Torah portion. You will see that come into play, and that makes it very exciting. Continued proof, of course, of the God origin of these words. So over a week, this aggregates into a comprehensive grasp of the Parsha, the weekly Torah portion. Another idea: if reading seems too difficult for you, you might consider finding a rabbi who teaches the Torah portion daily online. My best suggestion for this, if you don't have a particular rabbi in mind, is to go to Chabad.org. And again, on the next video, I'll be going to all of these websites that I'm talking about here. But go to Chabad.org, go to Rabbi Gordon in his daily Torah portion. Incredible teacher, incredible teaching. He is a blessed memory, but he's taught millions in his really unique blend of scholarship as well as humor. So again, recommend him. Even if you do study Torah on your own, it doesn't hurt to have extra opinions and ideas, and Rabbi Gordon would certainly be a good place to start. But there are many other rabbis out there that I'm sure will do the same thing. So, as with some other sites, also I'll take you to look at those again when we do our time in the next video to look at my study routine. Now, another option, and this one's a little more complicated, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's not. But another option is to adopt a 3-year study plan. So tradition now in modern times is that you read through the entire Torah in 1 year. So as I said before, there's 52 parshas in the 5 books of Moses that the 5 books of Moses are divided into. so that within 1 year's time, each week you can get through a different parsha and complete the Torah in 1 year. But it is interesting to note that there is a 3-year study plan. And that actually, for whatever it means, that study plan was apparently the one that was used the most prior to the destruction of the temple. So Jews in Israel, or Israelites in Israel, would use the 3-year plan more often than they would use a yearly plan. And you can find the portion. It's not always easily available to find how it works, what portion you're supposed to read for each day. But you can go to another website. Again, I'll take you to it next video, called HebCal, HebCal, Hebrew Calendar, hebcal.com. So they break down the weekly portions in 21 sections over 3 years, rather than 7 sections in 1 year. The problem with this, and this is why I call it complicated, the problem with this, for me anyway, is that you really have to at least read the entire portion, because you're only studying a third of the parsha before you move on to the next one the next week. So I mean, it's not like it follows it. You're going the first 7 sections of this parsha, you're doing this week. The next 7 sections you're doing next week, which kind of makes sense to me, but that's not the way it's done. So again, there's not a lot. I think the conservative movement may use this plan, but otherwise not a lot of other folks are using it. But I suppose the advantage is that as far as just focusing on studying a small portion, which you really have to do even within the yearly plan, it enables you to just focus on a particular smaller portion to study. But anyway, you can check that out. It's another option for you. I don't know that it really takes up a whole lot less time, but you look it up, look at it, see what you think. If that's something that works better for you, that's out there as an option as well. Now, whether or not you use the 1 year going through the Torah plan or the 3-year going through the Torah plan, it's still a good idea to think about a multi-year trajectory. Where do you want to go each year? What do you want to add new each year? Again, I'll talk about my plan when we get to that in the next video. But one possible trajectory could be something like this, where you begin with just reading the foundations. Next year, you might add another Daf Yomi or an online program. The third year, you might increase your community involvement, either online or in person, in terms of Torah study. Then begin moving to advanced resources, review and mastery, ongoing growth. So that's one plan to do that. The advantage to that is, again, you have online resources that you can work with. So you get that systematic study of Torah as well as Talmud. We're not going to talk about, even though the rabbis consider the study of Talmud in some ways as important as Torah. But as you're beginning, I don't want to go there. I want you to focus, if you're beginning, specifically on Torah and on getting that into you and understanding. So, but again, you can leverage online communities and peer support for accountability and also access to diverse rabbinic teachings. So if you like to plan ahead, there's several ways that you can think about enhancing your study every year. One is what we just went over. Another way that I'll talk about again, and the way that I use, and we'll talk about that in the next video, is to add Simply add a new commentary or two, a new commentator or two, a new source for commentaries or two to your study each year. So begin with maybe two commentaries. Again, I'll go over all this with you next video, but that's another way to add to it. So again, each year you're going to add different commentaries to your study. Or you can come up with your own plan, but it is important, I think, to plan something that keeps you interested and keeps your study fresh and expanded each year. That's the goal. That's what we're going for. So let's next talk about the spiritual power of the Hebrew letters. And of course, this is a subject that is important to me as we talk about studying Torah. My pitch here is for learning Hebrew. And I'm probably preaching to the choir, as the saying goes, because many of you may already be taking my or someone else's Hebrew class. But for those who are feeling like learning Hebrew is too daunting a task to do, I say to you a few things. Okay, one is that even learning how to recognize the letters, and you can take that course here at Yeshiva B'nai Noach. It's 10 sessions, and you will after that be able to at least recognize the letters. Doesn't give you a vocabulary, doesn't give you grammar, but it just enables you to read the Hebrew, so you can begin recognizing the letters as you're reading them, and we'll talk about why that is important. Okay, so that's a beginning place. And the other thing I want to mention is that in learning Torah, you're not only connecting to God's mind, but to the mind of a very special people chosen by God to be priests and teachers. And for those of you that may not be Jewish, may not have that background, it's important to know, as I mentioned before, you are reading in the Torah a love letter between God and the Jewish people. Not to say that God doesn't love all people, but this particular letter is written to Israel. So to understand that, it's kind of nice to get into the mindset of those people. There must be some unique quality in these people in Israel for God to make that choice that these are his people, his nation. And your job in studying Torah is really to learn about and connect with that quality. What is it that God saw and sees in Israel? What is it about the Jewish soul that matters? And this is important whether you're Jewish or not. So what does this have to do with Hebrew? And this is where I want to get to the fact that even though it may seem hard to you to learn the language, I want to encourage you with a couple of things. So whether or not you believe that Hebrew is the language of God, it is a fact that this was the language of the Hebrews. There's a great sci-fi movie, and I talk about this a lot because it brought out so many wonderful things and thoughts about all of this. But the movie is called The Arrival. If you get a chance, take a look at it. If you're opposed to movies, fine. But I think as movies go, this one's a pretty good one. But it's called The Arrival, or maybe just Arrival. I don't know if the is in front of it. And the movie demonstrates how vital language is to understanding those who speak it. The movie, by the way, is based on a study called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. And before you ask, no, this has nothing to do with speaking Klingon. The names of the two who proposed this just happen to be Edward Sapir and Benjamin Whorf, who I don't think is at all related to our favorite Klingon. But in this hypothesis that they propose, they talk about the fact that the language a person speaks shapes, influences, and or determines their perception of reality, cognition, and worldview, unquote. So it follows, according to their premise and the premise of the movie, that as you learn a language, this language, Hebrew, you'll also begin to see and think with the same worldview and mindset as the people who wrote the book. The more you learn, the more your mindset changes. So even if you never fully learn Hebrew, the more you study it, the easier it may be to understand the meanings and mysteries concealed in the Torah. Again, can't prove this. This is just an idea. It's a hypothesis, but I think it's a valid one. Add to this my belief and the belief of others that you already know Hebrew in your soul, especially if you have a Jewish soul, you already know Hebrew, but probably all of us do in one form or another, given our origins were with God. So all you're doing when you're learning Hebrew is remembering. So if you think it's too hard to do, just kind of go with that in your mind, saying, okay, I'm not actually learning a new language. I'm just reminding myself of a language I already know. It's a little more complicated than that, but it's another way to think about it. Engaging with Torah in its original Hebrew enhances comprehension and gives deeper theological concepts that are often diluted in translation. Hebrew study also strengthens connection to textual tradition and supports advanced commentary exploration. So it should come as no surprise that research in second language acquisition illustrates that reading sacred texts in the original language deepens cultural and intellectual engagement. But wait, there's more. Kabbalistic teachings emphasize the unique spiritual energy found in every single letter of the Hebrew alphabet. I talk about this a little bit in an introductory way in the mystical Hebrew class, but recognizing the fact that each letter is believed to hold a mystical significance and convey divine influence, this can make the act of reading or just scanning Hebrew text spiritually impactful, regardless of the reader's language and proficiency. So as you come across a Hebrew script, and I'll try and remember to show this in the next video when I'll have examples of scripts and that up on the screen. But again, the idea of scanning. So if we're doing that with the English, pretending that these are all Hebrew letters, all you're going to do is just with your finger or a pointer or somehow scan across each letter. You don't have to read it. You don't have to understand it. You're just going to scan the letters. I would go in the direction, that the Hebrew goes. Don't just scatter all over in scanning, but actually read across a line, a second line, a third line, etc. But have some way that you are focused on as you go across quickly every letter that's on there. The theory mystically is that your subconscious will receive that information. Your subconscious that knows Hebrew already, in this theory, will receive the mystical power of each of those letters and the words that those letters form, again, into your subconscious. That's the mystical theory. So there's another way that if learning the language seems too hard, at least have a Hebrew Bible and try it. Can't hurt, might help. So again, this idea of the scanning does come from Kabbalah, and one of the practices that they encourage is that you especially would do this with Kabbalistic texts that you would scan. and there's a great energy there as well. But again, all I'm talking about here is doing it with the Hebrew text. And the belief, as we talked about, is there's a visual, energetic connection to the holy letters that transmits spiritual benefit and facilitates inner transformation and growth. So again, I'll demonstrate the technique in the next video as we go through it. So, but just recognize that that is out there. It enables you. Another way that enables you to connect with the Hebrew letters and words, even if you don't know the language. Try it, give it a month, see if it makes a difference. But reading the Hebrew with comprehension is still the best way. So learning the language so that where you not only can read the text, but you can understand the text, that of course is the ideal situation. And just one final note on the idea of scanning, or at least engaging with the Hebrew letters, is that it does open that direct channel to Hashem, to the spiritual, in my mind. And for non-Hebrew speakers, this approach allows participation in mystical practices, fostering a sense of inclusivity, a sense of being involved in what's going on, while maintaining reverence for the sacred language. And please always remember that this is a sacred language. I talk about this a little bit in the Mystical Hebrew class, and that is that one of the reasons that Hebrew almost did not become the new language of Israel is because there was this sense that it is a sacred language. Even in the first century, you'll find that Aramaic, which was the language of the day of the people, most commonly spoke, that between that and Greek in the rest of the world, but in Israel, Aramaic was the lingua franca. It used the same script, but it wasn't considered the sacred tongue. So what the rabbis were concerned about, and we see it to some degree happening, is that as Hebrew becomes the language of the people, it begins to be diluted with other than sacred text and words and script, and that can be a problem. So again, as you approach biblical Hebrew, as you approach the study of Torah, please remember that this is a sacred language. It is not to be taken lightly or frivolously. It's one of the concerns, not criticizing here, other than to say it's one of the concerns for people that throw around the Yad He Vav He term and think that they have the correct pronunciation of it, and therefore they think that they can then say that word, even though it is supposed to be kept sacred. Just that's as much as I'll say about that. But the idea here is to remember that the language is a sacred language as you're studying it. So let's talk about translations now. Translations play a critical role for beginning students to comprehend passages fully and to connect with meanings not immediately clear if you don't know Hebrew. So a bilingual approach helps scaffold learners' progress and deepen understanding. And the idea that I want to get across here, I guess, in terms of the bilingual approach is, if you don't own one, please purchase one. I think if you can purchase nothing else, having a Hebrew-English Torah, Tanakh, is a vital addition to your library. You can get them online also, and if you can't afford to purchase one, fine. But it's not a bad thing to have in your library. But again, either way, you want to work with a bilingual. Obviously, you have to work with a bilingual text, but choose something that's easy for you to see both languages fairly, easily, as in going across, either with the English below the text or just to the left of the text. You can find that books in both formats and online in both formats. Rabbinic commentary encourages study of Torah in an accessible language. There's nothing wrong with reading Torah in your native language. But as you're doing that, you want to be gradually integrating Hebrew fluency, and just have that bilingual cognitive flexibility and retention. So pay attention to that. So since we spoke of rabbinic commentaries, let's take a look at a few you might want to engage with initially. You can find these commentaries in the Chumashim that I spoke about in the last video, the first video that we did, as well as Sefaria.org, which I gave you a tour of in the first video. If you missed it, please go back and take a look. Again, there are markers below on YouTube that you can go to different sections. So the Chumashim tour was about halfway through the last video. If you didn't make it that far the first time, just spend some time doing that and going through it, because I do mention some of the major Chumashim, but many of them may not deal with all of the commentators that you might want to check out. So be aware, Sefaria.org generally has most of them, but even some of their commentators aren't translated into English yet, so it might require doing something a little different. But at any rate, that's a good place to start. In some cases, though, I would recommend, if you can afford it, because generally you can't find them online, but I would recommend purchasing some complete commentaries from some of these folks in English, some of these great rabbis of the past. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's see if we can do this fairly briefly. Traditional Torah study deeply values the insights of classical commentators. And here's a very brief look at some of the main commentators. Again, the names I have here, of course, is nowhere near complete, but these are the ones I think you should at least begin to engage in. I'll give you some brief information about these, but I encourage you to spend some time on Wikipedia, if nowhere else. But Chabad.org, other sites will have much more information on each of these commentators, and it's nice to really be familiar with them. And then you can say, oh, I really like this person, so I'm probably going to like his commentary. But the one that it's almost a requirement. There's no halacha about this, but maybe there should be. When you begin your Torah study, you want to begin with Rashi. There's just no better way to begin for a beginner. Rashi is Rabbi Shlomo Isaac. He's from the 11th century in France, and he teaches the Peshat, and we'll talk about that in more detail later, but the simple meaning of the text. He is, beyond a doubt, the most widely read commentator, and again, elaborating on the simple meaning of the text with easy to understand elaborations. And it's said that he wrote these commentaries for his 5-year-old grandson, trying to answer the questions he might have. And of course, his 5-year-old grandson was far more advanced than I am, and probably most of us. But still, it's a great way to start. Now, and I said 1 or 2 each year, so you might begin with Rashi. A good companion to Rashi is Ibn Ezra, or Abraham Ibn Ezra from the 12th century in Spain. He does essentially the same thing as Rashi, but he'll also give a lot more information about grammar in the text, and look at some of the Hebrew. So it's kind of nice to get that perspective as well. Rashi doesn't always deal with that, with the grammar and the Hebrew itself. But so Ibn Ezra, another good one, who focuses on the simple meaning, and a good companion to Rashi. Now, another one, and this I guess I can say this is halacha, because there is Talmudic instruction that encourages the reading of every Torah portion in Hebrew and in Onkelos, and every Chumash that you find will have Onkelos, but not translated. But you can get a translation of Onkelos. But the reason Onkelos becomes important, Onkelos was a Roman convert, related apparently, or possibly related, to the Caesar, the great Caesars in Rome, not Julius Caesar, but Titus, I believe. I'm not positive of that, but at any rate, he was a convert, and one of the things that he did, and he's also a great scholar, but he wrote an Aramaic translation of the Hebrew Torah. And because Aramaic was the more common language, oftentimes, if there's a Hebrew word that becomes difficult to understand, if you go to Onkelos's translation, he'll give you a simpler word, and it enables you to get a better idea of understanding the Hebrew. So that's Onkelos. Again, for some, that's a vital. I'm not necessarily saying it's as vital as beginning with these two, Rashi and Ibn Ezra, but if you can add Onkelos in English translation, not a bad idea. But again, that may be down the road as something you want to add as you become more scholarly in your endeavors. But that's out there. Another one is one of my favorites, but again, this is not a beginning commentator. Ramban, who is Moses ben Nachman from the 13th century in Spain, and he integrates mysticism into his biblical interpretations, along with law and philosophy. Now, he often takes issue with Rashi and Ibn Ezra and others, and he's a little harder to follow for the beginner. But many of his insights are really so profound, even if you are at a basic level, that it sometimes might be worth the extra effort to read him. Sadly, as I said, he's one of those that many of his comments are not translated into English on Sefaria. But you can purchase an English set of commentaries from him on ArtScroll. I don't know if he's anywhere else online in English. I don't think so, but he might be. Look around. But again, perhaps not your first year, but he's certainly someone to look forward to adding to your commentaries as you go along. So another one I would recommend somewhere towards your first year is not up here, but Sforno, or Rabbi Obadiah ben Yaakov Sforno. He's from the 16th century England, or Italy, I mean. Sforno, Sforno. And you'll see a lot of his English translations on Sefaria. He was from 16th century Italy. His commentaries are unique in that they often conflict with the very popular ideas of other commentators, who would include and Maimonides and to some degree Nachmanides the same way, who actually include Greek Aristotelian ideas in their works. Now, he was opposed to that, Sforno, we don't have up here. He was opposed to that, and so many of his commentaries would be in critique of that. So it's nice to see the balance there. The other one I would really highly recommend is Or HaChaim. Again, also readily available on Sefaria in English, but Or HaChaim does get into the mystical, but he's easier to follow, a little easier to follow than Nachmanides. And so Or HaChaim was Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar, and he was from the 17th and 18th century Morocco, again emphasizing not only Kabbalistic but Hasidic thought. As a matter of fact, the story is told that before anyone had heard of his death or HaChaim's death, the Baal Shem Tov reportedly said, quote, "The light has from the west been extinguished," unquote. So again, he's a good alternative to Ramban Nachmanides in that he's easier to understand. Now, another one that I would not necessarily add until 2 or 3 years later, but again, if you really like this sort of thing, he's a good one to add. But he's another one like the Nachman Ramban, who you probably will have to purchase his English translation, because Sefaria has some of his, but not all, and not most of his translations on the Torah portion. But what the Baal HaTurim does, Rabbi Jacob ben Asher is his name. He's from the 13th and 14th century Spain. Is he highlights gematria, the number studies, looking at the letters, and also the linguistic connections. So this word is found here. You can also find it over here. Therefore, there's a connection between the two, and patterns like that that you won't get in any other commentaries. So that's the nice thing about the Baal HaTurim. So something to consider. But again, you would need to purchase his text most likely. But all of these together will give you, again, we haven't talked about the Tosafot, or essentially Talmudic scholars and their commentaries would deal with the Talmud. And there's more out there. You can again check online at Chabad.org and many other Sefaria.org, and you can see many other commentaries and kind of check them out, look them over, see who you want to begin with. But as you're just starting out, here's really where I would recommend beginning: Rashi and Ibn Ezra, possibly if you have time, or HaChaim. But those would be the easier ones to get through at a beginning level. I can't stress this enough, though. I mean, and I did this. I still do it. You get so excited. You want to add everybody. I want to read everybody. And after you do that a few times and you've spent 2 or 3 hours, which is nice, it's wonderful. If you can do it. But you begin to get overload, and the danger of that is that you cut everything out. So be careful not to try to do too much to begin with. You might, as I said, limit initially your study to 1 or 2 commentators, and then add a few more each year. And when I talk about commentators, I also refer to the different chumashim that have their own commentaries. So if you want to add a different chumash every year or other year, that's another plan. And you can search online to see if there's any place you can find commentaries free besides Sefaria. Another option is to purchase a volume at a time. So as you're studying Genesis, just purchase the Genesis volume of 1 Chumashim. You can buy them separately. And generally it's about the same price as if you were buying, if you bought 5 of those volumes at the same price you would get a volume set. But at any rate, it's a nice way to do that. And you can then just study the weekly portions in that book, and then when you're ready for the next book, purchase that. Plan on about $30 for each volume. You might be able to find the volumes on Amazon or on eBay or other places used, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just be careful, because if you get one that's been marked up and has margin notes, and it can get very distracting. But otherwise, that's another option. And if money is tight, but desire is great, you can also purchase the book and be careful with it. Don't write in it. You can, take notes outside the book for quotes that you want. And once you've done that for the entire book, then you can sell it online after you've done, copied whatever comments you want from it, and written them in your journal. And yes, I speak from experience. You can sell them online for about half the price that you spent initially purchasing them, fairly easily. You can try for more, but usually if you want to sell them easily and quickly, then half price is what you can expect. So at any rate, that's another way that you can save some money, but also add these commentaries to your list. So you want to start narrow, avoid overload, align with your study goals, and broaden in phases. Especially if finances are an issue online, there's nothing wrong with digital copies, digital websites where you can check things out there. Comprehensive Torah Tanakh editions with integrated commentaries, cross-references. Sometimes it's very nice. It's actually nicer to be online than it is to have the book, because there are various things like the cross-referencing that you can do in a book. Websites like, and again, we'll go to these websites in the next video, Mikraot Gedolot, which is on alhatorah.org, Sefaria.org, Torah.org, Chabad.com. Many others are excellent resources that are provided free, although, and always think about this if you can. It's free to go there, but it costs them money to do it. And if you can, donations are always accepted on these sites. It's a good idea to every now and then to send some money. It enables them to continue, and it enables others to be blessed by their sites. So these sites enhance deeper study by compiling related texts side by side. As I said before, you can do word searches, hyperlinks to various sources. You can have multimedia content. You can broaden accessibility and study modes. There's also many Christian sites. Again, I don't want to imply that you have to go to a Jewish site. There are many Christian sites like Blue Letter Bible. I use them as well, that also have wonderful resources. But as I mentioned before, if you use those, please also use sites from Torah observant sources to expand your horizon. Now that you're ready to begin your study, let's talk about the bringing of the Garden of Eden into your plan. The rabbis teach that there are 4 levels of study. These can be seen as incorporated into every study session or as progressive goals to deepen your study over time. More likely, you do both. The Hebrew word for orchard comes from a Persian word for an enclosed garden, PaRDeS. In English, by the way, we get the word paradise from this word. And the rabbis have developed an acronym based on the 4 consonants of the word, or the 4 letters of the Hebrew word, because again, remember, vowels are not part of the word itself. And that acronym is based on each of those 4 letters. It's P for Peshat, which means the simple, plain, or straight meaning, pointing to the literal meaning of the text. R stands for remez, meaning a hint or allegorical. The word remez means hint, and it also is the allegorical meaning in the text. D stands for drash, which means to seek or inquire. And you'll often hear a rabbi's sermon referred to as a drash, because it means to look for the story in the text. What does the story in the text teach us? And how does it teach us to live? The S stands for sad. Sad, meaning a secret or a mystery. It's understood that every verse, every word, even every letter in the Torah can be interpreted in these 4 ways. So as you're applying PaRDeS, you're going to begin with the straightforward surface meaning of the text. Clarify grammar, context, plain sense of the meaning before moving on. This is your foundation. Before you do anything else, make sure you have read the script and understand it at a very basic level. Don't try and go too deep until you've got your foundation clear. This is the plain meaning of the text, because nothing else will contradict the plain meaning of the text. From there, and again, you can do this in stages, or you can do it, you can go through a verse this way, then this way, then this way, or read through the entire Torah first year just at the Peshat level, second year just at the Remez level. There's all different ways to mix this up, but Remez then is identifying the subtle hints and allusions within the text. Look for patterns, word plays, intertextual choices, echoes. The drash then is exploring deeper interpretations through analysis and classical sources, compare commentaries and synthesize themes. And the final level, and this level, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, shortly, but this is a dangerous level. Be careful with this level. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with engaging in it, even at a beginning time. But this, you don't want to dwell here for very long until you've got your firm foundation set. It engages with the mystical, the esoteric, and requires oftentimes meditation on a particular verse or word in order to get a deeper insight. Again, you want to primarily reserve this for advanced practice and proper guidance, but if you're reading other commentators who are interpreting at this level, sometimes their interpretations are easy enough to understand that it becomes easy for you to follow. But we'll talk about this. So let's take a familiar verse and demonstrate how the 4 paths of study might be used. So here we have, of course, I'm sure you're familiar with it from the Hebrew. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. And the way that you are traditionally familiar with having that translated is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, so now, at the Peshat level, you simply understand this to mean a very basic and foundational thing. And that is that God is the creator of all things. There's only one God, and that God is the creator of all things. So that's the Peshat level. Get that established. Have that deeply embedded in your mind. Then you can go on and you can begin to do other things. At the Remez level, then, you might ask yourself some questions and look for answers to them, or meditate on the answers yourself. So again, what are some of the hints, some of the allusions that exist within the text itself? So here's God, the omnipotent, powerful God, who is creating the heavens and the earth. Why? Why is he doing that? Why would he spend his time creating? And if God is the creator of me, Did he have a purpose in mind, a plan? Did he create everything and leave it to function on its own, etc.? So many questions that you can come up with here. At the drosh level, you might think about what this means to you personally. If God was capable of creating everything, including me, I should certainly trust that he's capable of taking care of his creation and knows what's best for me. And if that's true, how can I show my thanks for God giving me life and caring for me? So that would be at the drosh level. Come up with a story, a way to understand this verse that makes your life better, makes your life closer, draws you closer to God. Again, I'm just throwing out ideas. There are many, many other ways that you can focus on these three. So now let's take a look at the sod level. And I'll show you why it sometimes can be an issue. So at the sod level, there's so many directions you can go with this verse, and there are in fact many, many rabbinic books, entire sefers written on certainly on this one verse, but also on the creation story. But so let's just take a cursory look here. The first thing we might notice, and again, you have to have some basic, but all you need is basic knowledge of Hebrew to do this. So you're looking at this word here, Bereshit, which is translated in the beginning. In the Reshit, in the beginning. Okay? But the first thing that should pop out at you after a basic understanding of Hebrew is this doesn't say in the beginning. If it were in the beginning, you would have a different vowel under here, not the shavah, not the two dots on top of one another. So it doesn't say in the beginning. It just doesn't. That's incorrect. It should be in a beginning. Or the bet can sometimes be translated as when. So when, rather than it, perhaps, meaning when God first created. So that gives you now a whole new set of thoughts, a whole new set of roads to travel down in understanding or trying to understand this verse at a deeper level. It should be obvious that this is fun, but it's also dangerous. And if you're not grounded in the first Peshat level, in the first thing that the Peshat level teaches you, and that is that God is one and the creator of all, then you might do something else. You might take a look at the word Elohim that's translated as God. And you might say, wait a minute, that's a plural word. Why is God, of whom there is only one, be given a plural word here? I'm not going to go into it. There are many reasons, but you have to begin that study and that deeper connection to those reasons with the firm knowledge that God is one. There are not multiple gods out there, and that's not what this word is telling you in this place at this time. So your search for meaning here has to find explanations that don't deny your foundational understandings. And of course, there's many other ways you can look at this one verse and on these four levels, but always understand that whatever you think you discover cannot change the basic Peshat meaning of the verse. So this is why you want to begin your journey by reading other commentators, other Hebrew scholars who have looked at these things, and they'll have comments on them. And you can be assured, if you're dealing with recognized Hebrew scholars, that those comments won't go against the Peshat meaning. And you can be comfortable in learning things from them. So that's all. That's the main thing I want to say about the PaRDeS, about strolling in the garden. So effective application of PaRDeS involves intentional study phases, focusing on different levels, either sequentially or cyclically. Beginners start with Peshat, gradually introduce Remez, Drash, Sod. We talked about that. But the other thing that you may have noticed is, and we sort of looked at this when we dealt with, when I gave you the example of looking at one particular verse in those 4 levels, is we came up with questions. Questions are an excellent way to spark roads of study you might choose to travel. And when we get to the next video, I'll show you how I use questions in my study. But it's a very, very powerful way, I think, to study. Question-driven study fosters higher order thinking because you're coming up with questions. You're seeing things and saying, why is that happening? And that's encouraged by Talmudic tradition. Debate and inquiry is something that is very Jewish. It generates and enables you to explore textual questions, as we did with Bereshit. It improves your critical engagement and personal connection. So again, questions are a very important part of Torah study, and also then reflecting those questions in your journal, in journaling and discussion groups, and that's such a dynamic approach to develop. So we'll deal again with this a little bit more, but the idea of cultivating meaningful questions. So in conclusion, successful Torah study combines a consistent routine engagement with original Hebrew texts and the wisdom of traditional commentaries by exploring the multiple layers of interpretation, fostering active reflection. Students deepen their understanding and connection to the texts. This balanced approach nurtures lifelong study and spiritual growth. So as I've been saying, in our next video, we'll take a look at my journal and how I study specifically Torah. Not that it's special, not that I claim any scholarship in what I do, but if it gives you some ideas, fine. If not, that's fine too. But I'll take you through my journal and how I developed it and how I use it on a daily basis to study Torah and work with that. So I hope you'll join me then. Thanks for spending this time with me for Yeshiva B'nai Noach. I'm Tom Averna. This has been our journey to learn how to study Torah. Shalom.